Okay, in this lesson we're going to be looking at how to draw straight onto Toon Boom and use that to animate with. For that reason, I've got my Wacom tablet connected to my computer, and I also have to admit that the Wacom tablet I'm using at the moment is well over 20 years. It's a very early version of it, and I remember purchasing it for about £70 then. When you consider that bamboo Wacom tablets, the entry level stuff, which is probably far more accurate than the one that I'm using, is around about £70. They have become cheaper when you take into consideration the fact that we've got inflation, 20 years inflation, and the fact that prices have risen all over. So yeah, it's a good buy to get one. Of course, the bigger that you go, the more expensive they become. I actually prefer the very small versions of them. I don't like this whole idea of making sweeping gestures with my hands right across with the bigger tablets. I prefer something that is fairly small, and it's only my wrist and fingers that are moving across the whole of the space that we've got. So that works for me. Everyone to their own. Alright, in order for us to actually start drawing anything onto Toon Boom, we need to make sure that we are in the drawing layer. If you don't want to use the original drawing layer, you can always hit the plus sign and choose from the option menu. I think the default option menu is called drawing, but you can actually have various different types in there, including sound, image, a new camera, etc, etc. We are using the camera, and it also automatically gives it a name, and the name would be the name of the project that we've chosen, which in our case was test, but you could change it to something else. Let's just do that. I'm just going to call this ball. And then once I've done, I'm quite happy with that. Also, number of layers that we want, one would do. When I click on that, it'll put it right on the top there, and that's where it's going to be. And you notice that I don't have anything in that layer at all. So with that layer selected, with the first, I'm making sure that we are in the first frame, we can start to do our drawing. Create our drawing, and there you go. That's my first one, and you notice that it immediately, once I finish, it vectorizes it. I can go on to adjust the size of the pen to make sure that it is actually what I want. There we go. And I can adjust the smoothness of it. So let's just try that. And the size of the pen. And that, as you notice, will have an impact on what we want. So with that said, I'm just going to click on, and in fact I'm going to make that quite large so it doesn't take as long. So rub that out. Once I'm actually quite happy with the pen and the size of it, I can just get on with making my drawing. There are different options there. I can choose a pencil, I can choose various different shapes, and they do various different things. I quite like the brush, and like I said, this is a very old tablet, so a new one will probably give you a lot more accurate response. So again, going back to the top, yeah, that's way too thick, so I'm just going to undo that. Go back to my pen and make sure that the size is dropped down to something that's quite small. And let's drop the smoothness down to something like a medium. Okay, so this should do it. And there we have you see that automatically vectorizes it sort of changes so that even when you zoom in or out, you don't lose any quality. With that first layer drawn, I can go to the second layer. Again, I've got sort of onion skinning turned on, but I could turn it off completely so you don't see anything underneath. Of course, onion skinning is incredibly useful because you can actually then see what you've got on the previous layer. We can even have the one at the front as well, but that comes in when you're actually trying to test your animation. So what I'll do is actually turn that off completely. Alright, so we've done our first drawing. I can go on to do my second drawing. And you notice that your hand isn't going to be consistent in this case, so it's up to you whether you want to copy the original one and paste it to the next one. I personally don't like that. I quite like the changes that we get. It adds to the vivacity of the animation. And you notice that when we go to the next frame, that what we have got is that the first layer that we've done is much lighter. The second layer is much more color, higher in opacity. So again, I try and sort of keep that consistency going with the lines there, and move on to the next one. In terms of spacing, then I'm going to and so on. And now we can actually go back and play this. But we can do that by scrubbing back and forth, or we can hit the play button here and see it being played as it's meant to be. Alright, you may want to slow things down a tad. Say here that you may actually want to make those a little bit slower and have a much more dynamic bit of animation there, in which case you probably need to increase the numbers of those frames on the scene for each drawing. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Let's just say these 3 here. So if I go to my exposure sheet, highlight those 3, right click on them and set the exposure for those 3 to 2, you notice that the first frame is actually on the scene for 2 frames. So each frame gets doubled up until we get to the 4th one, which would be this one here, where we wanted things to speed up. So if I play this now, you see a marked difference in terms of the timing of it, because each one has been exposed. For the first 3 drawings have been exposed across 2 frames, so that will slow things down a bit. And I may want to do the same thing right at the end there. So you can actually alter the timing for each individual layer. So you've got something that is much more you have a lot more control in terms of the timing on your animation, and that works quite well right across everything that you've got. Okay, so that is the basics of animating in Toon Boom in a very, very basic way, in a really rough way. Now, another thing I have to say, that most people tend to use the drawing in a really rough way, so they will just basically hack in various different drawings in terms of what they want for the animation. So then test the animation in terms of timing and spacing of those, working all these things out, and then go back and create another layer and sort of do the cleanup, so do the proper drawing on top. So you tend to get really quite rough images on the scene as you're sort of animating, and then once you're quite happy with the movement of it, with the timing of it, then you can go back and do a bit of cleanup on that. And that's why you have you would have layer called, say, bull rough, and you would have bull cleanup, and that's how you probably work it, especially when making a lot more complicated stuff.